Hello and welcome to the first episode of a podcast I'm currently calling Pillar of Origins. I'm your host, Jonah, also known as Dualcast Gaming. With me is my wonderful guest. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hey guys, this is Zainam. You can normally find me at Twitter at EDH_Academy.
Awesome. Let's just get right into it. So, the whole goal of this podcast for the listeners is I want to try to highlight various community members of Magic the Gathering and just kind of see what makes everyone tick, see how they got started, what kind of drew them into the community as a whole. So let's start off with that important question is how did you start Magic the Gathering?
I think I started it in two phases. The first one, I was in 7th grade, so that would have been in around 2002. A couple of my buddies had some starter intro decks. We would just play it just on the concrete in front of our classroom during recess, and my parents got me one of the starter decks from that year, which around that time was Torment. And when they didn't fuel that any further, I kind of just put it on the back burner, didn't really think about it until 20. Well, it was the end of 2013, the beginning of 2014, when a buddy of mine had 2 commander decks at the time, and learned the basics real quick from there. Played it and really fell in love with the game, and more deeply fell in love with the commander format as a whole.
So would you say your favorite format is Commander?
Yes, by far and away. I think if I were to ever explore another format, as far as actually playing it, it might be Modern, because it's the only format that I could afford that has the sophistication that I normally am looking for. I probably would be on. To be fair, the only thing I can think I'd really want to play in Modern is Giftstorm, which ain't exactly like the best. Hey, I want to test my deck. Oh, do you now?
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you storm off now? No, I did storm off for 4 turns. Okay, well, I'm gonna swing you with this, and you're done. Or they'll play like the Rock and then just get thought seized for days.
Right. Yeah, Storm isn't exactly one of those. Hi, I want to try a new format kind of builds.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something where I would. But the problem is that my personality, I would never look online for what storm piles do. I'd have to just do test hands for hours on end to make my own piles. And then when I thought I discovered my own, yeah, here's this link to a subreddit about Modern Storm. Here are the piles. Oh, that would have been great months ago while I was pairing. But now that organized play has been on the decline, and Modern being even more on the decline as far as supported events go, I'm just glad that Commander took off the way it did.
Oh yeah. Speaking of which, you mentioned how you kind of build philosophy. Do you kind of take that same way into Commander, where you just kind of start with a brew and just try to do it your way, or do you have anything do you use online resources or anything like that, or are you just I want to brew everything from scratch?
I try to use resources like EDH Rec, but I only really use it to find not so much the meat and potatoes, but kind of the veggies or the side dish of the meal. Because the one thing I don't want to do is just come with a deck that runs all the cards that everyone expects out of the commander, or runs every card that's expected out of the archetype. So what I try to do as a muscle building exercise for my mind is to use Scryfall.
Yeah.
And to really have an idea of what I want the deck to do, and then using Scryfall as my way to search by a given set of parameters and build my decks that way. So I do try to go by the brew method first, but I will use EDH Rec sparingly if I find myself at a brick wall.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's kind of similar to what I like to do for it as well. Just try to, come up with my own stuff a little bit. I can definitely appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you mentioned you kind of got into Magic in 2 different phases. For that second phase, I know for me personally, I got into Magic had a very short period of in between before I really jumped off.
Mhm.
For that jumping off point, what set was that? Like, what was your the first set where you really started paying attention to the cards and really knew what was in the set?
So I would say, let me think here. What was the first set I was actually actively looking at spoilers? Um, I want to say I was actively looking at spoilers around Shadows over Innistrad, and yeah, it was definitely at Shadows over Innistrad because I started playing at Origins, and I was just still trying to get my feet wet into the format and didn't really know how best to do research or wasn't really plugged in yet. And I think it took me that about 18 months to actually start finding spoiler websites and actually looking at cards that are coming through and kind of go from there. It was around Amonkhet where I thought I can get into standard by running blue-white approach of the second sun,
That was a fun
and
deck.
it was a fun deck. But the concern that I have is like I didn't have the mindset to learn how to sideboard properly, and for standard, I knew that I was only going to last about 2 years, and I was just not into spending all that time and effort, like really learning a format, really learning the deck, the sideboarding, stuff like that. So I just didn't even bother because I knew that once Amonkhet had rotated, blue white approach was just not going to be viable in modern. The format's way too quick, and the answers are way too reliable, and the deck just wasn't fast enough.
Yeah.
So, and
Even if you have like a memory lapse for your own approach, like that's still, approach is a 7 mana big white sorcery.
well, I was using Aetherflux. I was using Aetherworks Marvel.
Yeah.
So I would cast. So I had an energy package. I'd cast it, tuck it 7 deep, use the Marvel, fail to find, and then cast the approach off the top. And I liked it for a bit, but I think at the end of the day, it would have required the Blue Gear Hulk, at least 4 copies of, to have reliable answers. And at the time, I just was not in a position to be, buying 4 Gear Hulks. And
Yeah. I remember Gear Hulk back then was such an expensive card. It was like 20 or $30 for each one, at least.
yeah, 20, 30 each one. And then, if you were so unfortunate to want to have the Masterpiece copies, forget it. You weren't getting
God,
those.
yeah.
That was just even worse. But, yeah.
Yeah. That was definitely a fun time to get into Magic. You mentioned you started playing around Magic Origins again.
Yes, that was right around the set where I started because I remember I started playing. My venture into Commander was actually in Dual Commander, and I remember it being Origins because at the time Jace Vryn's Prodigy was a viable mono blue commander, and I remember it being Origins because the first pre-release I went to was Battle for Zendikar, and I just went just because like I was Jack Squad at Limited, and I'm still Jack Squad at Limited now, but I just went, just thought, you know what, let's try it out, let's see what it is, and I made away like a bandit that night because I pulled Obnix was reignited
Oh
at that
yeah.
pre-release, and for some reason it was valued at like $25. So the moment that I had it in my hand, I just threw it on eBay, sold it that night, and shipped it. And now it's been reprinted to the ground. And even before it was reprinted into the ground, it's not worth much at all.
Yeah.
So I made it pretty well. I did absolutely horrible in limited there. I don't know like the limited strats. I don't focus on archetypes because once I got into Commander, like limited archetypes don't really matter to you anymore because you're looking for wizards, you're looking for goblins and elves, you're looking for like specific things for decks you already have. And so you don't care about like, oh, this is a bomb limited spell in limited. Yeah, but it only kills a creature power 4 or greater. I don't need that in any of my white builds. So
Yeah, you don't need the 5 mana red blue uncommon that makes a 4/4.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, your deck might
Exactly.
be like that, but usually you don't really need that kind of card.
Yeah, for a long time until we got Prismari and we got Savai, a 6 mana uncommon that makes a 4/4 was just absolutely worthless. Like to
Yeah.
make that card actually viable in Commander is like, nope, not. Oh look, I can pay 2 mana to cycle it, or not even cycle it, just discard and make a treasure out of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's still a tough sell.
Yeah, what's that card,
So,
Call the Skybreaker? Like, that at least has retrace
oh
on it.
yeah, I think Call the Skybreaker having retrace, but plus it makes a flying
Yeah.
creature as well. So that's having flying is a very important keyword to have. If Call the Skybreaker was just a 4/4, I don't think it would ever see play.
No, it
It
would
was just,
have to
oh
cost,
look,
like, half as much. Even with the
yeah,
retrace.
yeah.
Yeah. Alright, so with all that, with you, getting into Magic, um, what point did you really feel like you were part of the Magic community as a whole, and not just playing a game with some like random strangers?
To be fair, I think so. The answer to that question is definitely more of a niche case because the only time I ever feel like I was truly part of the community was when I started content creating. And I felt that way because I started content creating in easily the golden era of content creation, where there was a guy who was trying to get a collective of content creators kind of in a unified sense together. He was assembling a team, and he was trying to use the hashtag WeAreMTG as a way for small creators to kind of cross promote people all under one banner. And so that's when I started creating content, throwing stuff out there. And when I created content, that's what got me onto Twitter. Whoop. When I created content, that's what got me onto Twitter. And once you were lined up into Twitter, because we had that hashtag WeAreMTG, the cross follows and the traffic onto my page was tremendous. Like I was getting follows from a great number of people, and I still have a great number of followers that truly don't represent my sphere of influence in the community. I think I'm at 1150 is where my follower count is kind of ebbing and flowing from. Like sometimes I'll go up to 51, down to 1148, back to 1150. But I've been that's just kind of where it started was when I joined Twitter and joined the content creator community because we were all trying to help each other get seen, get noticed, get our content out there, and it's just been riding that wave ever since.
Wow. So what kind of got you started with that though? What made you want to actually make content? Like what kind of content were you making?
So my first goal when I was trying to make content, and the reason why I have the handle I do, was I was trying to create content that helped teach people. For the lack of a better term, it was the quote unquote proper way to get into Magic, or it was to help give people the tools and the skill set to be able to get into EDH and then keep up with the format as comfortably and as easy as I was. Because for me, I loved playing the format. I loved playing EDH. It was such a unique place as a deck builder, so that touched on the creative side of me, but also as a player, which touched on the competitive side of me, and it really brought the two together. And so I wanted to help others be able to get to that same level that I was, where I was looking at spoilers, and even though I wasn't hanging on to every thread, like every spoiler, I'd be able to quickly look at a card and go, okay, what is the cost? What's the output? What are the stats of the creature? Are there any relevant creature typings to it? How does one get into the game, learn as quickly as I did and even then I'm still learning things, but there has to be a way, I thought there had to be a way to just be able to crash course yourself into the format and quickly be able to get in, get playing, and really shorten the learning curve or learning time that I had to go through and get through the trenches and actually learn the hard way by making a series of mistakes in deck building and in singles purchases and and sealed purchases, that I was hoping that by shortening that length of time, we can get more people into playing quicker, and they wouldn't have to learn those the hard way and go through that process that I did.
Right. Yeah. Commander is, it's kind of a paradox a little bit where it's the most beginner friendly format with the most rules questions.
Yes, it is. It's only beginner friendly because it's a group experience, so it's not like you're trying to get into Magic
rather than like a competitive one.
Right. So it's not like you're playing Magic against the spike of your best friend who was like, "Hey, I want to get you Magic." Okay, sweet. How do I play? And then as you're playing, he's just pub stopping. He, she, or they are just pub stopping you with combat tricks and interaction and instant speed. You're like, "Wow, I really suck at this game." No, I just know so much more than you, and there's only one opponent. So there's nothing we can do to leverage having multiple opponents and think about it. But yeah, EDH is a really fun format, and the community. I should say the Twitter and MTG Online community, as far as content creators, is really inclusive of people. And I think the problem is that people run into different types of people in real life, and it creates this dichotomous coexistence of two different sets of people while still being under the umbrella of EDH.
Yeah. Yeah, Commander is such a fun, different format. Which brings me to my next question of what was the first Commander that you played? Because I know you said you got into Magic mostly through Commander for that second bit. And then what was the first Commander that you actively built yourself?
So So the first deck I ever purchased was the Fraley's Llanowar Fury deck from the 2014 Commander products. That was the first one I bought. I ended up purchasing Omnath Locus of Mana because that's the one my buddy had. And Locus of Mana was kind of the first deck I built by co-opting so much of the elf support that came in the deck. That elf deck had so many of the staples for an elf deck that I didn't have to buy, like Priest of Titania, Elvish Archdruid, the Zuri Renegade Leader, and just I think it came with both Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves, or it came with one, but it just came with so many of the pieces that it was just easy to, like, alright, here's 15 pieces you don't have to worry about, now you just gotta fill out the rest. And it came with Emerald Medallion, Moss Diamond, just so many great cards in there.
I forgot those ones came with the medallions. Those are so expensive nowadays.
They are, and that's because that 2014 deck was the last time we saw them reprinted as a whole. Now, the Duretti deck later on would be printed in an anthology set, so there are more red medallions printed than the others, but yeah, they're expensive. And I guess for a good reason, because they're just such solid pieces, but I'm afraid that what's happened... they're good for... in the focused or tuned range and monocolor, they're absolutely great.
Yeah.
But once you start going to optimize and CEDH, those just fall by the wayside because they're at a completely different level, and their turn sequencing is so much shorter than that of casual players. But the first deck, I can't even say the second deck that I built was my own, because I literally saw the commander I saw the archetype I wanted to play, which was Infect. I had seen that played at a viable level, and I'm like, I want a picture of your deck. So I had him sprawl it out. I took like 3 or 4 pictures of it, and just literally built it card for card, having no idea about card interactions. I'm like, that deck, it seems to work. I'll just build it and figure the rest out after. And it worked out in a different way. No, I did not end up keeping that deck around. I eventually just made it into an Azuri Claw of Progress and Sage of Hours combo deck, which I never found a proper build for, but I'm still always trying to... I eventually always go back to Azuri Claw of Progress because I love the commander. I love 1/1 counters. And Simic is already just a strong color combination that it already is. So
that's really funny. The commander I always go back to, I've built this commander 5 separate occasions is Mizzix. From the
Oh
same European
yeah,
ones, yeah.
from the same year. Yeah, that series of the concept of experience counters and that particular cycle of commanders was just such an interesting time to be around. Like especially because Baron of Clan Neltoth just freaking took off.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just and it's still a beast to this day. It's just there were so many other commanders and partner commanders that came out that were at her level that unfortunately, because you have such flexibility to be in multiple colors outside of two, that she just kind of came off of the popularity radar. Still good, and she's still a very loud commander, as that concept of how dangerous a commander is just by looking at it, just by seeing the command zone, is still up there. It's just there were so much more. The field has gotten so wide on loud commanders that people sometimes just like drawing cards. It's not just a slow instant bring it back. But the sad loser in that whole cycle has to be the Boros one.
Oh yeah.
It's just so hard to build that deck because
she's such a good back then. She was a great red-white giant commander.
Yeah, but the problem is that giants are so expensive, and Boros is just struggling to ramp.
Completely the wrong color combination for it at the time.
Yeah, it definitely was. And then the backup commanders for that was like Gisela, and then another angel that cared about life totals.
I don't even remember what the red-white backup commander was.
I can't tell you her name either, but I know that she cared about your opponent's life totals being at a certain point. And once it reached that point, she gained other keywords. So they were all on the combat strategy, and that's what ultimately made it fail, was that it wanted to focus on combat, but it wanted to focus on combat based on big creatures, which Boros fails to get going. Now, if you were trying to say, oh, let's put in a Gruul commander that wants to focus on power 4 and greater and do something like that, yeah, Gruul's fine because it has green to actually ramp you into it. Red gives you haste, and you can actually make a viable big creature deck. But when they threw white instead of green, I don't know. I miss experience counters, and I hope they eventually come back to it later for the allied colors.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about all that, and with the red-green deck, I can't even count how many times I have been stomped by a Xenagos deck.
Oh gosh, Xenagos is just a whole. I don't even count. Xenagos is really hard to pin as like a green-red deck because you don't even need to follow basic green-red philosophies for that deck. It's just ramp as hard as you can, land something, and it's going to hit like a truck.
Yeah. I had a friend that had not a CEDH deck, because Xenagos isn't quite CEDH obviously, but it was pretty high power optimized, and he would just drop a hasty threat, get Xenagos trigger, cast Berserk, and that was a player dead right there.
That was a player dead.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what Xenagos does.
Here's the red-white commander. The alt was Anya, Merciless Angel.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, she's a 5-mana 4/4 flying that gets +3/+3 for each opponent whose life total is less than half of their starting life. And she has indestructible as long as one person meets that condition.
Oh, so as long as one opponent is under half, she's indestructible, and she gets +3/+3. Okay, so yeah, it's almost one of those things where like
indestructible threat in Boros.
She is, but the problem is that you got to get an opponent under 20.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you're trying to get an opponent under 20, like, yeah, technically that's going to happen if you're going to win the game. But I feel like Boros needs to be at a point where you're just playing more like Aurelia strats, where it's like, okay, she's landing, we're getting multiple, or more like a Morag type of deck, where like, okay, combat's going to happen multiple times,
right,
and people are dying this turn.
And like that's because the other problem with her is I just realized usually with those strats you want to go and hit one person and take them out, because otherwise you're gonna have 3 players that are all getting low and all want to take you out before you hit them. But once an opponent is out, she no longer tracks that opponent, so then it's just back to being a 4/4 flyer, unless you also manage to get another opponent under that total.
Right, and I think for a deck to work like that, I think she was more of just a like if you wanted to play Boros Angels and couldn't afford Aurelia, she was going to be that fit for you. Because if you have evasive attackers like Flyers, which White likes to put on the bottom end, or Dragons, which Red likes to put on their top end, they can start attacking multiple opponents and get you to that point. But it's really hard to design for Boros. For Boros specifically, now Lorehold is on a completely other paradigm because
Strixhaven is for Red-White was great.
Yes, they put the emphasis of playing the game on interacting with artifacts and cards in your graveyard, especially with cards like Goblin Tinkerer and stuff like that, where things are leaving your graveyard, or with Retrace, Flashback, Jumpstart. Not even is Jumpstart is a mechanic from Third Trip Around? Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought I was talking about the pack for a second. I'm like, that can't be right. Or Jumpstart, and then cards leaving the graveyard, and then it gave you an offensive threat through Notorious. Velamachus was just a great, I'm going to swing, get extra combats.
Yeah, and even that namesake card, Velamachus, it's card advantage in Red-White. It's, it's a big 7-mana, 5/5 flying haste. Like, look out, it's Boros. But at the same time, it's able to look at your top, I forget how many cards, and just play a card for free. Like that's
as long as its power is lower than it. But when you start playing things like Seize the Day and Relentless Assault, all of a sudden, and then from there you just play standard Boros things like Sword of Vengeance, Sunforger, and things like that to give it double strike. And now you're taking out players. You're taking out multiple players, if not the table, within a single turn. And that was something Boros was just not able to do. Because Boros tried to mix it was trying to do a white strategy, which was go wide with like Battalion.
Yeah.
But the support color they gave it was red. And red kind of does its own thing. Like it doesn't, yes, it can mesh well with others, but it meshes well with others in ways that are independent of the other colors. But that could be an entire other podcast episode. We're not going to get into the nitty gritty of how is red its own thing. But I definitely think that Strixhaven gave new life to the colors, and I was really hoping that it was going to be a signal for new things to come. But then Avengers of the Forgotten Realms came in, and we bounced right back to where we started from.
I justify Forgotten Realms. Every time I think about it, I'm just thinking, it's just a core set. It's just a themed core set. We don't need to judge it too harshly.
Unfortunately, but the thing is, their attitude on core sets is constantly flexing. Okay, we're going to do core sets. Okay, we're going to drop core sets. You know what? Core sets, we're good again. And, yeah, I guess it just is a heavily themed core set. And, I mean, it's not going to be any different in 2022 when we have Battle at Baldur's Gate. That's just a heavily themed Commander drafts. It's a heavily themed, format-specific draft product is what that will be when it comes out.
Which sounds like such a niche product, and yet it's probably going to be one of the highest selling products that WotC releases next year.
Oh, hands down. Well, because it's riding off of the success of Commander itself.
Yeah.
So let's say that the limited environment was just hot garbage for Baldur's Gate, and they completely messed up on that. They were riding the laurels of Commander Legends. They're like, you know what? Let's just do it at Baldur's Gate, and they pull a Forgotten Realms, where either you love it for the theme, or you kind of are okay with it based on the cards that come out.
Yeah. I mean,
but there's no people who love it for both.
Forgotten Realms had great lore and great references and everything. If you're a D&D player like I am, it's amazing seeing all that. One thing I just found out, if you were looking at the Discord today, it was pointed out the back of the art cards in Forgotten Realms actually has the monster stat blocks for 5th edition on it, which I didn't even realize. And that's just a neat little touch that they added that there's little things like that make me appreciate it more. But then every time I try to think, okay, what are my favorite cards from there? I just draw a blank, because I'm like, do I really play anything from there in any of my decks?
And that was the problem, was that from a lore and a flavor perspective, Grand Slam, just automatically 3 runners on base, and you just knocked, and you have a 50-foot park, and you just knocked it out of there.
Yeah.
because of like the italicized text in you find some prisoners or other cards like that where it gave you a choice, or cutting action from one of the rogue cards where it makes it unblockable. That was done really well.
Oh,
It's just I don't think it really had the space
right.
to do crazy different Magic things because, as you had put it so nicely, it was a themed core set. It couldn't really go beyond like this fixed scope of what Magic is,
Yeah, it had
where Boros
it
just
had to
cares
fit
about punching
certain
and Simic is just card drawing.
Right. And, Bruenor Battlehammer. Okay, it's red white equipment.
Yeah,
What a
exactly.
shocker.
Okay, let's move on. Exactly. Oh, look, red white equipment. All right, stamped approved. This is what Boros does. Let's move on. Let's hit the next guy.
Yeah, and was
Um,
it Dritz? He's this really cool character from Forgotten Realms lore. He's an elf. They put him in green white, so of course he makes a token.
And of course, he cares about creatures with big power, and if you lose one, he gets bigger. So, oh no, if you kill the cat, oh, he's going to be angry. He's going to get 2/1/1. He's going to get a couple 1/1 counters on it, which is already what Green White wants to do.
Right. Like,
And I think there's another lady where when you gain life, you scry and get a 1/1 counter on her. So,
yeah, and I mean individually, each card is interesting with how they kind of do that top-down design for it, where the flavor really does kind of meet it mechanically. But when you look at the set as a whole, like, oh yeah, Bruenor Battlehammer, he's all about swinging in big warrior, but again, it's red white equipment, and Dritz is green white tokens, and mono white lifelink here. It's all the same stuff, just themed a little differently.
yeah, but I think as long as you think of it as a core set, then all the boxes check, then you just move on from there. I don't think there's anything from Adventures of Forgotten Realms that was just auto staples. Like, yeah, I just don't think of anything like when they released Return to Nature and Return to in Guilds of Ravnica, or I'm sorry, War of the Spark. It's like, okay, you just run that over Naturalize every time. There's no reason to run anything different. That's just what you do. Same with Opt. Like, you just run Opt in all blue decks now because it's such a great 1 mana instant speed scry 1 draw 1. Yeah, it's not preordained where you're scrying 2, or Ponder where you're looking at 3, but
Well, now they have Consider.
oh, well, yes. Okay. So if we're gonna really split hairs here, yes, there is Consider, where if you are graveyard centric, like if you're in Sultai or in Dimir, yes, putting that in the graveyard is perfectly fine. But I think that I don't feel that Consider is like I wouldn't tell a new player that they should always be running Consider in every blue deck. However, I will say for like if a player came up to me and said, I want to play Tolerant or I want to play Mizzix, what card should I be running?
That storm count out. That's great.
Yeah, but I just think Forgotten Realms was great on flavor, great on sticking it the way Magic normally does, and if you try to think about it more than that, you're going to be disappointed.
Wow, we've really devolved this into just ranting about how much Forgotten Realms was a disappointment.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, like, it's important to think about how these things affect you, because sometimes for me, if Commander's starting to get not if it gets stale, but if I start running into a dry spell when it comes to wins, or I don't feel very ingenuitive about deck building, I could at least fall back on the settings and environments that Wizards of the Coast has given us for these adventures as pretend interdimensional space wizards that we are. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna, like, for Kamigawa, we're gonna be going into what's essentially Cyberpunk 2077, but we're going to be going back to a plane that for a long time was thought to be like a 9 or a 10 on the Radia scale, I think it's called.
I think that's
where it's just so unlikely that we're ever going back. You might as well just write it off as being, all right, well, we're done with Kamigawa, but now we're going back, and it's exciting. There's so many things. There's so many new places that it can go, and so many things that it could bring back. Yeah. I'm just excited to see what they do. And now that we don't have an Eldraine set to really water down what Kamigawa could do, like when Theros came out, it was like, wow, the cards that shown from that set was like Uro, the other Titan whose name I can't remember, that was it. Because Eldraine just overshadowed it so greatly, which I'm glad for Eldraine that they were able to go back and do kind of a Tales of Brother, like Grim Tales, kind of like true childlike fantasy with those stories and stuff like that. But then we also learned some very valuable lessons about, the power level of cards and what it would be like. And it just makes you wonder, like, wow, what was the future of Standard going to look like with these cards? Because you have to remember that when they designed these sets, with the other future Standard sets in mind. And so
it was crazy. I saw the post saying, "Oh yeah, if the bans weren't in place, we would be looking at decks with Oko, Uro, Once Upon a Time, all this stuff in there. What is it? Veil of Summer."
Yeah, and that was going to be just it. Now remember, that was just green.
Yeah,
like green. So I'm just like, what was green going to look like in these Standard sets? And which is great saying, that
No, sorry. People were saying, like, oh yeah, Fires of Invention was supposed to combat it.
Yeah, but then, okay, so yes, Fires of Invention, which surprisingly sees no commander play, can't imagine why, is supposed to combat that, but then now you just have this battle of the titans of, like, these two incredibly unfair, quote-unquote, unfair decks, because, what we do in Commander is completely and utterly fair.
oh yeah, I'm just casting Mizzix is all. Don't worry about it. Just let me untap with Mizzix.
I am definitely not going to infinite loop into infinite mana the turn after Mizzix come out into a Krakoa power where X is 1,000?
Yeah, I only have Reiterate and, I only have Reiterate and a Ritual in my hand. It doesn't really do much. It's fine.
That's it. I have Reiterate and a Ritual. That's it.
It's just Reiterate and a Mana Geyser. It doesn't do that much. It's okay.
Plus, if you guys don't have any tapped lands, it's going to be utterly impossible for me to get to those high mana count numbers. So don't worry about it. Just cast maybe one spell each, and you'll be fine.
Off topic, there's a card called Reality Spasm that can tap or untap X target permanents. It's just a little blue instant uncommon from OG Zendikar.
No, that was from OG Zendikar or OG Ravnica? No, I'm thinking of... With multi-kicker?
No, it's just an X spell.
Oh, it's just an X spell?
Yeah, Reality Spasm is what it's called. It's...
I'm thinking of Street Spasm,
yeah,
which
is... I'm thinking of.
I'm thinking of Street Spasm.
But it's hilarious because it can combo with Reiterate for infinite mana on tapping my own stuff, or I can tap my opponent's lands and then Mana Geyser. It's the cheapest little thing. It's so dumb.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Speaking of fun plays, what would you say your preferred style of deck is?
Ooh, so
that's a tough question. And I'm gonna get since we're already doing tough questions, what is your current favorite commander as well?
Ooh, okay.
I'm just gonna
as an owner of 19 decks, I would have to really start, choosing which children are my favorite here. So, my preferred style of play would have to be mostly mid-range. So, I'm actively trying to win the game, but not doing so quickly. And that's because my favorite color in the game is blue. And I like playing blue because it has the highest pool of interactions at the most point in the game.
Careful, so you have everyone from Twitter come and attack you now.
Oh, please. I'll just say it now just to have it on the podcast, or just have it out in public where multiple people can hear it. If you're running blue, you have to be running more counterspells.
Yeah.
The thing about running counterspells is that it's not you must fire it. You just simply have enough tools to deal with spells that are either going to win the game or prevent someone from, or counter spell that's going to prevent someone from losing the game. Like, can you imagine if the one really slow blue, white-black player is going to cast a Fairy's Protection that will prevent them from dying? Boom! Dissipate. Right. I'm not asking you to run 15 counter spells and just... I'm not asking you to counter Kiora's Follower or Cultivate or Drawn from Dreams.
Counter spells are just Blue's version of targeted removal.
Exactly. But the problem now is we have Resculpt in Raven form. It's like, oh, you actually have targeted removal and counter magic?
I mean, don't tell J-Ro. He's just going to tell you all.
Oh, he's going to unsummon it. That's all he's just going to do. Just, oh, look, that's bounced your hand. I'll wheel it away because I'm running Queen. But I like Blue because of its ability to interact with so many other things that for my playstyle, I just happen to like that because they also have so many instant speed card draw spells that you can just cast on end step before your turn. Like, because I remember, oh my gosh, this was, back to when I started playing Magic. This was even before 2013. I was at a common area in my college, and there were some people playing Magic. This was during Innistrad Standard.
Yeah.
So at the time, no OG Innistrad.
Oh.
This is OG Innistrad Standard around that time. So like 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
And the deck that I was playing was just blue-white mid-range. I have no idea how the deck was supposed to win. Oh, you know what? I think I was playing Blue Delver. I think that's what it ended up being because I just remember
Blue and Innistrad. I'm guessing you're playing Delver.
But it was just mono Blue Delver. So it wasn't like I was splashing white for spirits or anything. It was just Blue Delver. And the only thing I remember from that was having Think Twice and Unsummon in the deck. And I think just being able to just end step flashing back Think Twice was really what sold me on Blue. Because I was allowed to hold up answers, and if you didn't provoke any of them, okay, cool, I'm going to cast Think Twice from my graveyard. But now that's also Radical Idea, Counterster's Insight, and Una's Grace.
Right.
Spoiler alert, I have a Talrand deck, so I've been really looking into instant speed at the end of your turn things to do to make Drakes to swing. But I have been trying to explore more in the blue space. So right now I have Simic, Izzet, and Azorius decks right now, and I'm trying to find
which commanders are those?
Oh gosh, that was a poor question to ask. I have three Simic decks. 2 Izzet decks and 1 Azorius deck. So my Azorius deck was Brago King Eternal until my boy Yorion was cast out from the Companion Zone, and now I'm giving it the love that it deserves as my new Blue-White Blink commander. Blue-White Blink happens to be like easily like of the styles that I like in blue. Splashing white for blinking I think is just great because it allows you to be interactive, but while you're being interactive, you're able to repeat value. It's just a value engine or an interactive engine that isn't specifically on drawing into removal spells. You can run removal spells or interaction pieces and also run permanents that are interaction pieces and just blink them.
Yeah.
But the way I have Yorion built now, it's not like Brago is easily the best beginner's guide to blink. Because if you don't have your Cloud Shifts and your Fairies, Time Twist, or Momentary Blink, you can just swing Brago, which already has flying. You're not dealing heavy damage, but that's fine, because then you just exile anything that isn't a land on your board, bring it back, and the fun starts all over again. But what I like about Blue, in conjunction with other colors, for the most part, you can get a wide variety of strategies to mix with blue, and it makes the other colors better. So in Izzet in blue-red, I have Galzith Prismari on one spectrum, which is all about ramping into a big X spell using interactive pieces, things that make tokens, and then going big. And then on the other half of the spectrum, I have Veyrin, which is really scratching my itch for playing Gift Storm.
I was going to say. There's a couple different ways you can run blue-red.
Yeah, and so I kind of picked the ends of the spectrum on that one. For Simic, however, I have the loose tribal deck in Simic Sea Monsters, and that's going like true to form, like Krakens, Octopus, Kraken, Serpents, Octopus, Krakens, Leviathan, because I pulled the Serpent of Yawning Depths out of a themed Arrows pack, and I'm like, Destiny has spoken. I have to build the deck.
With the new Runo, the blue-black one, that card is up to like $10.
Yeah, because turning things into functional unblockables, it's a good thing. So I have that right now as Galanra Brenolin, which are partners that are individually green and blue, because the only thing that really kept sea monsters at bay was that you had to cast them for their true value. But if you ramp into them, that's nothing. Then I saw Elegith, and I'm like, oh yeah, scrying into drawing, yes, we're building this deck. But I built that deck Sphinx Tribal, where a lot of the key players in the deck are Sphinxes, including running Sphinx of Insight and Chancellor of the Spires.
Nice.
Which I
love all of the Chancellors.
Yes, I think the Chancellors are a very unique mechanical aspect to them. And I think Sphinx of Insight was kind of like the next step into trying to get that back again without having to do a full cycle of them. But no, I do love the Chancellors. I just wish that some of their effects were a little bit... I'm trying to think... Nope. I think my concern with the Chancellors is that a lot of them don't do a lot when they come back in. Like, for example, the black one, which is the Chancellor of Dross.
I was just about to say, that was one of the first cards that I really started building around, was Chancellor of the Dross.
Yeah.
When I started playing Magic right around tail end of Rise of the Eldrazi, right before Scars of Mirrodin, and I remember Chancellor of the Dross. I'm like, oh, what if I just happened to draw all 4 turn 1? It's so good. And then it's just a 7-mana 6/6 flying lifelink, which
and that's it.
It's perfectly passable, but it's nothing like
Chancellor of the Forge, where you're making goblins equal to your creature count and they have haste.
That's part of a modern combo deck.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of them are actually kind of crazy, whereas, there's... It's from that period of Magic where when they made cycles, you had very clear winners.
Yeah, very clear winners and very clear... they're passable.
Like the Primordials.
Yes, like the Primordials. The Primordials were definitely on that. And even to this day, like, the Primordials have a clear winner, and that winner is currently banned. But
it did nothing wrong.
Sure, okay. Let's unban it for 10 minutes and watch the community just plunder into Simic Blink decks. Yeah, where you're just like, alright, on end step, I'm going to blink my Sylvan Primordial. What's that? I kill 3 of your lands? No, I'm killing 6 lands because I have Panharmonicon out. And I'm just going to ramp my way into victory. And the same thing with the Titans, the best one being Primetime, and that one's banned in the format.
Yeah, there's very clear winners during that period of Magic. Back on topic, I forgot to ask you your favorite child. We never got that answer.
My favorite what?
Your favorite child, your favorite commander?
Oh, my favorite commander. That's because I hadn't gotten to the last Simic commander, which was Uro, paired with Karuga.
Oh, it's Karuga.
Yeah, no, it's Karuga. Karuga was the only way I could make Uro fair at all. Was just it was to promise the table that I wasn't getting it out turn 2 and having 5 mana on turn 3. Because once you show that there's no Karuga, it's like, oh, we're dead. We are so dead. We have to target this guy and also have the nuttiest draw of our lives. Yeah, that's not going to be fun.
I don't know if you know of Hermit Druid on Twitter, but
yes,
if you've even seen any of his stuff, you know his Karuga piles are ridiculous.
I actually played against Hermit Druid one time, who was playing. I couldn't even tell you the blue partner, but it was Blank Kodama.
Yeah.
That's who it was. Sakashima Kodama. Yeah. Sakashima Kodama with Karuga as the companion. And he had the driest run ever. Like, if you saw that game, you would have thought Simic was at Boros levels of competency. But I think it was also because not only did he draw nothing, but the moment he tried performing a game action, we stopped it somehow. Because you couldn't trust it. Like, there was no way. There was no way.
Any of those 3 cards resolve, let alone any
much less anything else in the 99. Like, right. Oh, look, Great Henge. Like, we can't let the Great Henge resolve. Or if we do let it resolve, we have to kill it before anything lands.
Yeah, because, like, the problem with Karuga is anything in a Karuga deck you can't really let resolve.
Yeah, because Karuga's just all on card advantage, and okay, sure, they have to be CMC 3 or greater, but you still have bangers at 3 or greater.
Yeah, like, that's the, if 3 or greater, that just means the card quality is way up.
Yeah, exactly. That just means that the output is great for the cost, which you're always cheating in Commander.
Yeah, it's in Simic. I mean, do I need to say more?
No, there's nothing else to say. However, my favorite Commander for a very, very, very long time was Brago King Eternal. And that was because Brago had the flexibility to be a pure straight value deck where you just swung, blinked a bunch of things, widened your board, draw cards, gained life, or you can go the opposite plan and just be running every Mana War ever printed. You can run the entire Rishadan Brigand vertical cycle, and just Stonehorde Dignitary just became like the ultimate Gur card of all time.
I play Hopper, and one of my favorite decks to play is was it Esper Familiar, which is basically just a combo blink deck, and it has Stonehorn in there, and it's hilarious.
Because it just cuts you off combat, and those combats stack.
Yeah.
So it's not like Lavinia the 10th, where it's just detained until your next turn type of thing, where it's like, okay, as long as it hits my turn, then it's off. No, that stacks. And when you have Panharmonicon signed by Saffron Olive in your deck, yeah, that's going to happen a lot. So then when Yorion got printed...
Wait, you have a Panharmonicon signed by Saffron Olive?
I do.
I can't think of anyone that is more fitting to sign a Panharmonicon.
And it was completely by accident. I went to the first GP Vegas, way back when there was GP Vegas, and I was just walking around like the commentator. This was even before they had command zone, so you were just literally like any surface that wasn't nailed down for constructed events, you were playing Commander there. And I just bumped into him, with who at the time I didn't know was Richard. They were playing a game, and he was standing up, and I bumped into him. I'm like, oh shoot, it's you. And I did the quick test, do you like Blood Moon and Panharmonicon? And he said yes, so it had to be him. There's no other human on the planet who likes both cards like that. So then I just slid my bag down, grabbed my Brago deck, and I just stomped through, just racing through, looking for that Panharmonicon, and got him to sign it. And I think to this date it is my only signed card. And whatever Blink deck it's in, that's where it is. So right now it's in Yorion. And Yorion was originally in the 99 of my Brago deck until I started adding... cards that when they enter the battlefield, a permanent card that when it enter the battlefield reblink. So Felidar Guardian was the first one.
Yeah.
And then I got started to think about, well, what if Yorion was a commander? And then Resto Angel starts looking great. Felidar Guardian's even greater. Deadeye Navigator, Eldrazi Displaced, or Wistweaver Angel, you just start seeing these and you're like, oh no. It's no longer just doing it on all of my turns. I'm now doing these things on everyone's turn.
Yeah.
And now, so that right now is my favorite deck because it works best with something I loved seeing as a child at the mall, is they had a Rube Goldberg machine-like attraction, where it was just this freestanding thing of just this pinball just moving all around the place through a fixed pattern, and I could just stare and watch at it for hours. And now the problem I'm getting is targeted ads on social media where they have the ones you can make out of wood attached to a power source, and it's just pinballs moving, just same cycle over and over. And I'm like, and that's what Yorion became, which is just Rube Goldberg machine of value, interaction, and with Resto Angels, with Restoration Angel and variants of it, it now can only be can only be interacted with at instant speed.
Yeah.
And so now it's just foolproof. It's like we figured out, like, we're now operating on this whole other angle that's so hard to interact with that you can just sometimes win off of that. The problem is that once people see your Yorion, they go, no, please no. Love of God, no. I once had a mono green Stompy player, like 4 combats into the future, turned off because of the looping with Stoneheart Dignitary.
Yeah.
And
even if you die, they still don't get their combats back.
They still don't get their combats back. Beautiful delayed trigger business. But yeah, Yorion has to be my favorite as of right now. A close second is now a split tie between 3 decks, which is a Yara, which is functionally a black deck that is similar enter the battlefield like things. I love triggers. Cast triggers, ETB triggers, death triggers.
Yeah, you gotta love triggers.
No, but that's the problem though. It's not just that. I have Teysa Karlov. I have 2 different Ayara decks. I have Perforos. Right, and so I just love it. Like anything Harmonicon, like that's what I want to be doing. Which is why I'm trying to resist the temptation of building Wart the Raid Mother, so I can throw Twinning Staff in a deck.
Yes, yeah. I recently just built another deck actually that's kind of similar. It's what is it? Rayon I forget the actual name of it, but the red blue one that doubles all your triggers, like all your Magecraft triggers and such. And I was also running.
That's Varen.
Yeah, Varen. That's it. And I was also running Harmonic Prodigy.
Oh, you have to run Harmonic Prodigy.
It's so good. And I was trying to build it as this janky, like, I'm going to have all these cool triggers, but it's all going to be like, Pyromancer and Talrand, and I'm going to try to swarm with just a huge army. I'm going to be running, like, all the little, like, Preordain and Opt cantrips, just so I can say, like, okay, well, I'm going to cast Opt. Here's 2 4/4s, 3 2/2 Drakes.
Yeah, no, that you start on that, and then all of a sudden you remember Sorcerer class is a thing, and you're like, uh-oh.
Oh, yeah, that was
oh, no.
Yeah, the only thing you can do is give haste, which, did you know Lightning Greaves costs 0 to re-equip?
Did you know that Brutaclad automatically gives tokens haste, and Anger is red? And I think you're running a mountain or 2? Yeah, you could easily give haste in those colors.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're on the exact same deck building mindset.
Yeah, except for me, my Young Pyromancers, Murmuring Mystics, and Tolerance are just making blockers for when 1,000-Year Storm resolves and Storm Intelligence. And
yeah, no, we're definitely on the same track here. I decided to not be gross because I decided at one point to build quote unquote fair Mizzix using cards I pulled out of my Strixhaven booster box, and I still ended up winning on like turn 4 in a like mid to high power pod.
Yeah, that sounds like Mizzix, all right. That sounds like Mizzix. But of the ones that I like, it's Yorion first, and then it's split between Galanra Elegith, Ayara, and Varen for second, because they all are either dealing with triggers between Varen and Ayara. Those are just trigger happy. It's perform game action, 6 things are reacting to it, and then Elegith Galanra just lets me do interesting things with scrying, because I think scrying is my favorite effect in all of Magic, bar none, is at the beginning of your upkeep scry 1. That effect on a permanent, favorite effect of all time. So when I got my Thassa, God of the Sea, mwah. When they printed Lifecrafter's Bestiary, mwah. And then we got Mystic Redaction and Modern Horizons, and it was just like, oh my gosh, just give me all of it. And then we got the one where you roll a d4 out of Forgotten Realms Commander. And it's just like, all of it, just give me all of it, and I will buy all of your beginning of upkeep scry 1 triggers.
What about Jace's Sanctum, where you get the trigger to scry 1 each time you cast an instant sorcery?
I do love that effect, and it would be in Varen. Unfortunately, I found a cheaper option. It's from War of the Spark. It is a wizard, and it's a 1/3 for 2 that gains +1/+0 when you cast a non-creature spell and you scry 1.
Is that the weird?
Nope, it's a human. I can't. Yeah, it's a 1/3 out of War of the Spark, and she is currently my placement for Jace's Sanctum, because for whatever reason, whenever I play Jace's Sanctum, like I feel like it takes so long to get there, and with Varen being more along the lines of Gift Storm versus Prismari, like waiting till turn 4 just to get a 1 mana discount, forget it. I have Goblin Electromancer. I'm fine. Like I don't need all that many discounters. Because you have Bergie. You don't even need discounters when you have Bergie.
Yeah, she's a discount for all your red mana.
Exactly. So it's a figurative 1 mana discount.
Yeah.
So once you have Bergie, in fact, it's Bergie that ended up being my second copy
of. So actually, no, that's a 2 mana discount.
Exactly. So when you're getting 2 mana discounts with Varen in play versus the 1 from Days of Sanctum, I'm like, nah, I don't need that. I think I do have that in certain draft builds of Dika, Fractal Theorist. I really like the concept of Dika. I just never got a list to stick because I felt like I was focusing on too much of one end versus another. But if I ever went back to blue, into mono blue building again, I would try and find either a Dika build or, because I love Blink so much, Thoughts of Deep Dwelling.
Yeah.
But not doing any of the degenerate, I'm going to take your creature for a moment, blink in, now it's mine. Do more of like on the independent end, like, okay, I'm going to do my own thing, and the stuff that I'm blinking is mine and mine alone, but it's still equally dangerous.
Right. So you say you're a blue player. This is very apparent from the past 15-minute conversation we just had. What I always get this whenever I get with my normal pod is who's the responsible player at the table? Are you typically that responsible player that keeps everyone's combos in check, or are you just, I'm gonna go with the triggers?
See, I'm glad you asked that question. I am indeed the responsible player because of who I am as a person and my current development as a human being. I consider far too many things just in my mind, just dormantly, just thinking about so many different things, and I end up having trouble falling asleep because I have so many thoughts going on. That one concern that I have is that a combo will slip through because no one could respond to it. And because the community is so blue aversive, that not only are people like not liking it because of any number of things, between Cyclonic Rift being a printed card in the game, extra turn spells, and guess what, your spell doesn't resolve .deck, people are now so averse to running the colors to begin with, and are just vocal about not playing against blue because people end up running against Baral decks. Yeah. Where it's just day in, day out, if you have a spell worth casting, they will counter it. Oh, and then I'll loot to get rid of this big chunky thing that I can't cast anyways.
And draw another spell.
Right, exactly. And so for me, I feel like I have to be the responsible when I play blue because most people will not.
Yeah.
And currently, in the state of deck building, I feel that people this is not everyone, but a majority of people that I've seen play and lists that I see floating around is that they put so much effort into their own game plan A and B that they don't really consider everyone else's. And so when they run removal, it's usually just the greatest hits. So it's like Beast Within, Acidic Slime, Austere Command,
Utter End,
Anguished Unmaking, but they don't run a decent number of it to actually interact with people at all points of the game. Path's Exile, Swords of Plowshare, like cards.
Yeah, they don't
Upgrade, Chaos War.
5 or 6. They're like, oh yeah, that's fine. I'll occasionally do something.
Right, so they'll play like 5 or 6, sometimes even as low as 4, and then 1 Wrath. And so for me, it's like, no, I got to be able to interact more often. And so I end up running anywhere between like 6 or 7 counter spells, usually in a blue deck. Mm-hmm. The one exception that I have is the few exceptions I have are the newer Age of Blue decks I have, where it's Varen has significantly fewer because it needs more of the wheel spinning element of cantrips to get through.
Critical mass of spells.
Right, and I think the other ones are like in my Simic deck. It's really hard to try and fit counter spells because they have, because with Elegith and with Brenolin, they are still combat decks. They're just using a blue tribe to do it.
Right.
And so you need a density of creatures to get in. You need a density of ways to make them bigger and better, which reminds me I need to somehow fit Uvenwald Oddity in that deck. And so you don't really have the luxury of being in more of a mid-range setting where you don't really have that density of creatures to swing with, and so you have more options for counterspells. But in earlier builds of Yorion and in my Talrand deck, yes, you better believe that I'm running 8+ counterspells in the deck because it needs to be there.
Yeah, you are definitely the responsible player.
Oh, hands down. So for me, I try to run 8 forms of Purgatory. Yeah. But I mean, like, it's supposed to be a fun game, so most people think that by let them have fun is let their things resolve at the cost of you winning the game. And I feel like there's a way to do both, where you can have fun and try to win.
Yeah,
but some people see them more of like
treasure deck the other night.
Which one?
The treasure deck, the 4-color.
Oh yeah, 4-color treasures. Yeah. I like that one.
Like my deck, it has exactly one wrath because it makes treasures. It has exactly one counter spell because it makes treasures. But then it has, I think, 10 single target removal spells. And then there's other cards that just happen to be removal that also make treasures. So, I'm not playing all the exactly what it probably should be, but I'm actually trying to I'm trying to get rid of some of the removal spells because it's 4 colors and it's treasures. It can do gross things.
Right, you don't need to have a full ensemble of removal spells, right, because the treasure stuff will do its own thing.
Yeah, and if I'm trying to do all that stuff, like, okay, I can play all my stuff and keep all my opponents in check and just completely make the game go one-sided, or I can still run a decent, reasonable amount of stuff, do my things, and if at some point I run out of removal and someone happens to get that game-winning card, so be it. It's time for the next game.
Right, exactly. Now so I would agree with you that it's fine to run a certain number of interaction spells. My concern is that people feel like that if they run too many, that they're all of a sudden the control player. You could run, 8-10 counter spells and not be the control player. And then there's the argument of like that blue is the hardest color to play, and it requires format knowledge, knowing the potential of the cards that are on the stack and the cards that are in people's decks to know when to use it. Because a lot of times what people try to do is counter the spells before people can get up and running. I personally prefer to use counter spells when the spell on the stack would break parity. So, unfortunately, that ends up being like Great Henge, Zendikar Resurgent, Elish Norn, Jin-Gitaxias.
So you're not the Stifle the Fetch trigger guy?
I've done that once. I did that one time. We were playing in a 1v1 game against...
Okay, that's...
No. You haven't heard the worst part. Oh. It was against a Gisela deck, and it was a Terramorphic Expanse.
Oh, no. It wasn't even someone, fetching out a shock. It was just...
It wasn't even fetching out a shock or anything like that. It was just, I have the opportunity. I have the Nimble Obstructionist. I'll just cycle and stop your trigger. He didn't draw another land for the rest of the game while I was playing Baral.
Speaking of counter spells, now that we have this up, what's your personal top 3 counter spells to play? Not necessarily the best counter spells, but you think are objectively good, but what are the counter spells that you think are your personal favorites?
Disallow, Cryptic Command, Mystic Confluence.
So you like having the options?
Yes, I do my very best to run as few cancels as possible. So if there's anything, I don't even run generic counterspells. Like the counterspells that I run, if they only do one thing, it's because they're at 2 mana. So counterspell negate, that's all you can do really about that. Mana leak, arcane denial, that's all you can really do about that. But at 3 mana, I try not to run Saw It Comings and stuff like that. It has to be, so for me, my floor is Dissipate, where it counters a spell and it exiles it at the end. That is my lowest I'll do on 3. Anything that does less than that doesn't exist to me.
Yeah.
I love Cryptic Command because of its versatility. Mystic Confluence is the same. Having flexibility is very important in blue, because sometimes you need to be able to move from because if you have certain counter spells where it's just a counter spell but no one's playing anything, like let's say the elf player or the goblin player have their board established where they don't need to cast more spells, they can start swinging at you, but your counter spells can't stop it, so you need something to be able to respond to that, be able to pivot. And I think Disallow, Cryptic Command, and Mystic Confluence allow for that at a respectable level. Would I run Sublime Epiphany? Very unlikely would I run Sublime Epiphany. Because that's 6 mana, that's a lot to hold up.
Yeah, if I'm playing Sublime Epiphany, I'm playing stuff like Torrential Gearhulk, where I'm caring about that token that it's making, or something like that, It's got to be important.
Yeah, it's got it. I feel like if you're going to run Sublime Epiphany, you have to be doing more than just, I'm choosing every mode because I can. Like with Mystic Confluence, for 5 mana, you're mana leaking on a variety, you're bouncing a creature, drawing a card. Yep, those are the 3 modes, because that's what the Confluences do. They do one of 3 things, and then you choose each mode multiple times if you want to. So worst case scenario, if I feel like I'm in a ditch, it's a 5 mana draw 3.
Yeah.
It could be a mass unsummon type of thing. So I just really love the flexibility in those cards, which is why actually, hold on. I'm going to change one of them. I'm going to drop the Mystic Confluence for Supreme Will.
That's a good one. That's nice and cheap.
Yeah, it's nice and cheap. It mana leaks, but at worst case scenario, you could use it as a consistency spell. Yeah. And it's at 3 mana, so it's not like you're trying to... Because sometimes you're at 3 and you're just not drawing lands. And so with Supreme Will, you can either mana leak or you could impulse. Mana leak being counter target spell is to pay 3, or look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand, and the rest at the bottom.
Right.
So having that flexibility to either dig deep or counter a spell on the spot, I'm really a big favor of that one.
So, we talked a lot about Magic. And I want to know, what do you do when you're not doing Magic? What do you do in your outside life?
My outside life, I'm currently at a transition phase right now where I have a Switch, and I have some games on Steam that I like to play. My favorite game to play right now is Halo 3 ODST, and that's because the firefight mode just really allows me to go in and kind of do the same thing, but it's always different that I can do alone. Because a lot of other games, it's just, okay, well, here's story mode. If you know the mission, you know the routes, you just execute them. But what I'm trying to get into now is Star Wars Lego model building. For my birthday, I was given the helmet of Darth Vader to build.
Oh,
and of the 5 bags that they give you, I'm like halfway through bag 4. And so I'm really hoping that if I just set aside a couple hours and just really focus in, I can get that done and start looking at other models to do. The problem with that is, now that we're in this new age of Star Wars, they don't really have a lot of the old Imperial stuff. If they have anything, it's going to be from the First Order.
Yeah.
And so trying to find those old models of like the Death Star or a Star Destroyer or Vader's TIE Fighter, it's going to get pricey because those have been out of production for a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, video games, Lego model building, trying to pick up on some reading, trying to get into more of the old school sci-fi, because that's my favorite genre of fiction is sci-fi. I like the world building that goes into sci-fi because of how they try to solve different issues, while also at sometimes, I love the shows Black Mirror and Twilight Zone, especially the Rod Serling Twilight Zone, because not only do they venture into this alternative future, but they also reflect on the present at the same time. What? And just being able to do so flawlessly is such a beautiful art form to me.
Are you reading anything specific right now?
Right now I'm trying to burn through the Silmarillion.
Oh,
which if you've ever tried to burn through the Silmarillion, oh my gosh.
Have you read it before?
No, this is my first run, and it's a slog. Yeah, it's a slog.
Be prepared to read the whole thing, even paying attention, and then set it aside for a couple days, and then try to reread it just so you can understand some of it.
So what I'm thinking of doing, because right now I'm trying to read it cover to cover, and I think that's the problem, because the first part where they're talking about the creation of the universe is just so Genesis style.
Oh yeah.
That is just like, oh my gosh. There's like 15 of these guys, and they're all like god status.
It's very just in your face with everything.
And then you're trying to keep track of like where these things are, and they don't give you at least in the book that I have, they don't give you a map.
No.
And so you're trying to remember the geography of these places, and like
technically a map. You know the story behind the Silmarillion and how it was made, right?
I know. Actually, I do not.
So basically, Tolkien died before he could actually finish it. So what happened was it was just a whole bunch of notes that his son publishers just put together. And because I mean, I'm assuming you've read Lord of the Rings, if you've read Silmarillion, it's a lot more put together, and actually makes sense. There's all the appendices and all that in the back. Tolkien is famously very detailed with how he wants everything.
Yes, I believe the ongoing joke is like 8 pages describing the hair on the Hobbit's feet.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just the content; it's also the pacing. He really knows exactly how he wants it to be done with every aspect of his book. Very perfectionist, which you would expect from a master of language like he is.
Right, which makes the conversion to film such a feat, but also such a masterwork from Peter Jackson's point of view.
Yeah,
because I believe the Lord of the Rings, the story of it was meant to be kind of the slugfest of a journey where they have no allies. The hobbits weren't really engaged politically, so they didn't have any real racial allies to call on. And even when they did have Man to work on, the only reason why Man was such an ally was because Aragorn was just such an amazing person that he was able to leverage his popularity among men to get things done.
Yeah, I mean,
but otherwise, it was just the hobbits trying their best against all odds, and really going against the odds. Especially when you have those people who talk about like, why did Sauron not even see this possibility happening? And it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But we kind of like the journey of like, these guys trying to get through, and the interaction with Gollum and his betrayal of them in Return of the King. Then the people who are like, why don't they just ride the eagles into Mordor? Okay, first off.
There is a reason. It's just a very conceited reason.
That's kind of the problem. That's kind of the problem with Lord of the Rings. It's like it's so racial-based that even the eagles are racist.
Yeah.
And the one guy they like is like, okay, fine, we'll do you this one solid, but don't ever talk to us again. Hey, we finally killed Sauron. Okay, fine, this is the one solid you can call us on. Let's get you out of there.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite part of Lord of the Rings is, I've watched the movie so many times. I've read the books multiple times. I don't yet know the languages, but I'm sure at some point I'll have memorized, like a couple of words just to say, oh, I know this. But my favorite part has got to be the background behind it. Like, the very fact that it's not Frodo, the person that comes from this very well-to-do family. It's Sam, the gardener, that ends up throwing the ring into the fire. And having that all to do with the fact that, during World War I, where Tolkien served, the fact that he was an officer because of his family standing made him kind of feel stand apartish from, all the other people, even from his same town, him not being able to interact with them, and it being really them as the grunt, all the grunts, bottom rung, being the ones actually doing something. I just think that that's really profound.
Mm-hmm.
I could spew for hours on end about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting story, and even Merry and Pippin, who kind of have just a large footnote type of story in Lord of the Rings, in the movies, they have their own journeys and their tribulations, especially when they get separated from the Fellowship, and they end up having to speak to the Ents.
Yeah, everything with the Ents is huge.
And then I think Pippin becomes a steward of Gondor and having to do, that thing. So they all have their own adventures in their own right. But
They all
that is
have to roll
interesting
for
that you
more.
mentioned, like Frodo, like he has the heaviest burden to bear because he's the ring bearer. But everyone else has like a different struggle, but it's of equal importance because if they did not perform their tasks,
Yeah,
like the
it's
journey
all
of
the
the ring
influence
would
of the
be
captain.
very different.
Yeah, if Merry and Pippin didn't speak to the Ents and help defeat Isengard, then all these different battles would have been completely
Completely different,
yeah.
especially the Battle of Pelennor Fields at the very end. Like, can you imagine if they just ended up having both the Black Gate of Mordor and Isengard? Because Isengard had the Uruk-hai.
Yeah.
And those guys, because I believe orcs were not good in daylight. I think
Right.
that was like their main racial weakness is that they didn't do daylight very well. The Uruk-hai, that's what made them so fearsome, is that they can do daylight. So they were traveling at all hours of the day, all just wanting to get the hobbits for Saruman.
Well, you know what? Now we're gonna get those Lord of the Rings commander decks.
No,
Oh wait, no,
I
it's a
don't think
draft
we
set
are.
and
We're
commander
not
decks.
because it's a. Are we getting commander decks? I
Yeah, they're doing
thought
commander decks with it. They first announced that it was going to be a draft set, but it's also going to have commander decks with it.
I think it's also going to be a draft set that's the first one to go modern legal, just
Yeah,
straight to
that
modern.
part's kind of weird. I can get, vintage legacy commander. Yeah, whatever. The fact that it's modern legal and it's basically another Modern Horizons is kind of weird.
Yeah, I think, but the problem is that now that Wizards of the Coast is trying to do a bigger thing with Universes Beyond, but Lord of the Rings has the depth and density to do a full draftable set
Oh,
that
easily.
is still relevant to the fantasy world setting that Magic started from being from roughly the same magical setting as D&D, which was heavily influenced by Lord of the Rings, because let's face it, if you're in high fantasy to begin with, you can't not say that anything in your world is not inspired by Lord of the
No,
Rings.
100%.
Because there's so many of the rules set for races and how things work in the world started with that.
I mean, even looking at accents, I watched this amazing video the other day, actually just last night by who was it? It was Overly Sarcastic Productions, and it was about accents and how basically Tolkien's entire thing with going with British accents for the elves just to kind of give across this kind of alien vibe, kind of bled over into, well, now fantasy elves are high and mighty.
Yeah, in fact, elvish kingdoms in D&D books are stated to be like an example of what chaotic good looks like,
Yeah.
where they don't observe the laws of man, because why would they? They're British. But they're not like out to expand their own kingdoms or have like an imperial grip on the land.
Little
They're just
different
doing
from
their own
British.
thing, but they will definitely have their noses up to whatever you're doing because you don't live for 1,000 years and only choose to die.
Yeah, you don't go to an elvish kingdom and then find a whole bunch of orc monuments in a museum.
Yeah, I don't even know if you'd find even any relics of that kind. Like it would just be, yeah, we went to this orc empire and we won. We just won. That's what happened, and that's why this person has this patch of land named after him. But do we have any like pictures or like artistic depictions of it? Yeah, I think we have like a footnote of like one of the orcs surrendering to us, and that's it. But there's no like orc uniforms or orc weapons. Because why would you? Why would you remember something that's less significant than the elves?
Yeah. Oh my god, I feel like we could have an entire like series just about us talking about fantasy tropes and all that.
Oh, absolutely. No, I love what fantasy has to offer in terms of character development
Yeah.
because of the trials and tribulations you can put people towards.
Yeah,
Because with fantasy,
really lends itself to character arcs.
yeah, because the thing about fantasy is that it evolves, but it never ages. Like you never, like we have yet to see until you get into certain aspects of tabletop role playing games. You never see fantasy in the future until you get to games like Shadowrun,
Right.
where they actually talk about like those fantasy races that got merged into the future, and so you have, I think they're called like street shamans.
Yeah, that's why I'm so excited with what we talked about earlier with Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, because I'm like, well, where are the kami? Are they now all of a sudden going to be like energy sources for their fantasy cell phones? Like, how are they incorporating that? Because usually WotC is pretty good at doing that kind of stuff, so I'm excited to see how that turns out.
I mean, they did a fairly decent job when we went back to Theros when they only had one set to do it. Like, yeah, I know we weren't going to get 15 gods in that set, but replacing Xenagos in the green red slot and reprinting all the single color commanders, yeah, I'll give them that. So yeah, I'm interested to see. I think we're going to get all of the race. I think we're going to get all of the we're going to get a token for each of the um, the, the rats, the foxes. I can't remember their names, but the rats,
Kitsune,
foxes.
the
This,
Orochi.
yeah, I think they're all going to get their own token.
That would be
There's
awesome.
going to be a token variety of sort, especially not the Kitsune, the Tanuki. I mean, we've already seen a Tanuki already, so
Yeah.
we just got to figure out what color they are. But I'm curious to see where they go with that. My hesitation is that I am also wondering where the Kami went, because such a big aspect of the old Kami block was spirit based, and now that you're in the future, you don't really have the future. Future technologies of it definitely shows there's a shift away from what spirituality would look like. So now it's perhaps my guess is going to be there's going to be the imperial, basically the royal family of Kamigawa. They're going to have the royal family, and they're going to remember the old ways of respect, of worrying about the commies and keeping them in line, and that was stolen, and Okagachi and all those guys.
Yeah.
And then we're going to also get the futurists as well.
Oh my god! I'm imagining it actually being the Umezawas or something, and they're the ones running the current ninjutsu in Kamigawa.
Oh, I definitely think Umezawas will be leading the ninja lines.
Yeah, it's hiding the spirits from the shadows or something.
Or they could be the ones that Umezawa run the ninjas, and the ninjas are the one that keep people from discovering where the kami are.
Right.
And they're kind of acting like the underground enforcers type of thing, which will lead right into New Capena. But they're the ones making sure that no one uncovers what's going on. And I think, now I could be very wrong, but I think Tezzeret may be involved with Kamigawa to an extent.
Well, because
because
is supposed to be set way in the future from the current canon.
Well, it is set in the future, but I thought time operated very differently when it came to
It used to in the old. I'm pretty sure it's only from the old before the mending. I think now it's supposed to work kind of how it should across each of the different planes.
Because I thought that Lavinia would talk about how Jace would be gone for so long, as he ended up becoming the Guild Pact in Ravnica.
Well,
so
to be fair,
he himself was there.
Gone so long. He decided to become a pirate captain and lose his memory for the umpteenth time.
But even then, when he took the oath to be a part of the Gatewatch, he went to Zendikar, he went to Innistrad, he went to Ixalan, he went to Amonkhet, and he went to all these different places. Are you trying now? Given for us, I mean, for all we know, that could have taken months, or I should say years.
Right.
And having that'd be the equivalent of if randomly the governing law of your country just stopped existing. And it's what rule of law do we use? Do we just go by the old rules and we'll catch up on our disputes later?
I mean, that kind of is what would happen. Because, I mean, Jace wasn't very good as the Guild Pact.
Well, he was very knowledgeable, and he just memorized all the laws, and it was just boring to him because you would just have these, I think in one of the examples it was we have land disputes. And it's okay, well, technically the law is this, and that, so technically this person's better. And he wasn't on he was on the Azorius end of law keeping, not the Boros end of law keeping.
Yeah.
And when you're on the Azorius end of law keeping, it gets boring after a while. Because you're just technically knowing rules and saying, okay, this is how it is, move along now.
That's really hitting me hard as a rules advisor, man.
I'm just saying, but the problem is, he must have been doing it for quite some time.
Yeah.
And only being, having no creative input whatsoever and just being just the rules check guy. on like, hey, we have this dispute. And then it's no different than people who say, oh, I want to become a rules judge. Oh, really? How about humility and opalescence? How does that interaction work? And you're trying to explain layers to people, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
here's the 600s and comprehensive rules. You figure it out. I know it's in there. I'm off.
Yep, here's 603.7a.
Right, exactly. It's like, okay, here are all the priorities when it comes to forming layers. You figure it out. All I know is it's timestamped. Let's go.
Yeah, that's why I always just have it on quick reference for the comp rules. I'm not going to bother. I'll, if someone asks for a reference, sure, let me find it real fast.
Yeah. I think the one that most Commander players should learn about sooner rather than later is the interaction between Death Touch and Trample.
Yes, 100% yes. That's one of the main things that my treasure deck has an alt-win con is putting Loxodon and Warhammer and Basilisk Collar onto my first striking Akiri.
Oh yeah, that's.
And I explain to them it's not unblockable, but you really shouldn't block it.
Because lethal damage need just be a sign, and Death Touch says 1 damage is lethal damage. But that's actually one of the decks that I have on the that's finishing that I'm going to start brewing soon is green-red trample under the Croson Hero. Stonebrow Croson Hero.
Yeah.
And running that with Bow of Nylea and Oron Frostfang. And just like, okay, swing. How many bodies do you have? It's not going to be enough.
Yeah.
Don't try and chump block, single exchange. No, it's not going to happen.
It seems like it could be fun, especially if you put in that new, not Finn the Fangbearer.
Well, the problem with Finn is that you got to tap her. And the best way I've seen you being able to tap her, because I've seen a whole deck build around it, I can't remember if it was another person's. It was someone else, but also in the Skull Symbol Discord server. He ran vehicles with her.
Yeah, vehicles lead to so many dumb things.
Yeah, but they ran it with her because, like, you go swing, like, I'm going to crew this vehicle now. You have Death Touch. So, good luck with that. Especially offensively, defensively.
The one that gives Death Touch. I'm talking about Finn, the one that gives the poison.
Oh, yes. Finn, when a creature with Death Touch deals combat damage, put 2 1/1 counters. Yeah, but now you got the bigger problem. And the harder problem is giving them trample, which is not really hard. It's just the creatures that natively have Death Touch are so small and weak.
Yeah.
That, like, your Ambush Viper, like, you want to keep them for defense because they make blocks ultimately profitable.
Right.
And, like, trying to get Brawn into a graveyard, or I'm trying to remember all the mono green ways you can give tramples, like Nylea, there's a Mammoth that does it, and it's hard. Yeah. Like, I remember trying to build a bubblegum version of Finn, which is all cards in the 99 or 25 cents or less, and you're just on combat tricks for days, just out of nowhere, like, haha, this gets plus 2/+0 and trample.
Yeah, for 2 mana, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, it's definitely got to be like either 1 mana, 2 mana. Because once you go 3, it's like, can I give my team +1/+1 in trample? And like, you have to run all of the overrun effects that you can, so that way they can actually get in. And you got to run so many, and card draw is really weird because they're all the small creatures. So like, the most universal card draw engine I think is like Beast Whisperer and Guardian Project. Yeah. Which is on 4, and so your curve is at like very weird points. Well, all of your support cards are on the higher end of your curve, but all of your meat and potatoes are on the low end. And so when you draw your low end in the early game, it's like, okay, here's this 1/1 with Death Touch. Okay, whatever. Swing for 1. All right, I'll take 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're approaching. Well, we're past the 1.5 hour mark, so I think it's about time to call it for this session, at least. I would definitely love to have you on again to finish all these conversations.
Oh yeah, no, we should definitely have episodes 2 through 6 to wrap up all of the loose ends from the tangents we took throughout. But no, I had a lot of fun. It was great to be here, and love to talk Magic whenever.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Just so that everyone knows, we're at the very end here. You want to give another plug so that everyone knows where to find you at?
Absolutely. You can find me most reliably on Twitter at EDH_Academy. And yeah, between there and Discord, you'll be able to get a hold of me real quick. I'm constantly on both. So yeah, DM me, chat me up about Magic, and yeah, all the good stuff. So Twitter, EDH_Academy.
Awesome. It was great having you. I can't wait to have the episode where we just talk about Lord of the Rings plot holes.
Oh, well, fortunately for us, we're going to have a straight to modern set coming out for that. So, no, we'll definitely be able to. I'll actually be learning a lot from you in that one. So, I look very much looking forward to that.
That'll be a lot of fun.